Hi, I'm Sandra D, and I'm so glad that I get to spend a little bit of time with you. Now, you may have been thinking that you were going to get a download of a book when you clicked on this link, but Horse Wisdom for Human Life will be coming out, but it is still in editing. Sometimes it takes a lot longer than we expect. So I'm going to do you one even better. We get to be almost face to face. So I'm going to share with you some of the wisdom that comes from the herd. I'm going to share with you a little bit of the info that is in the book, Horse Wisdom for Human Life. And if you stay connected with me, you'll be one of the first people to be able to get that book when it is finally released. And I'm looking forward to that. But today, I want to share a little bit with you about how horses and the lessons that we get from nature can actually help us to communicate much more authentically and effectively. Because when we are authentic and we own our own natural strengths in communication, we really are much more effective in approaching people and getting the people that we need in our life, because they will naturally be drawn to us if we are being in our most authentic state. Now, what does that mean? Hopefully, I'll be able to shed a little light on that for you today. And if you don't know anything about me, I will tell you really briefly. I am a former actress. I spent most of my young life in front of the camera, really since I was about 11. And about, 20 some years into that, I decided that there had to be something else that I could do that might be a little bit more, I don't know, impactful than just being on shows. I was loving it, but in a way, I was hiding when I first started behind those characters because I didn't have the confidence. I didn't have my own voice. So in a lot of ways, I found my rescue in what I did for a living. I got to use someone else's voice. I got to play a character and be someone other than me. So it's interesting that our topic today is about being authentic and speaking in your own strengths, because that actually is my passion. My passion is to help people understand what their value is, and they are already perfectly designed by God to be able to create an impact in the world that is just designed specifically for them. So it's a matter of you really stepping into who you are and living your best life. So let's move into today. If in our little training here that is taken from the book Horse Wisdom for Human Life, I'm going to share some slides with you, and hopefully this will go smoothly. So I'm going to do a share screen. I'm recording this on Zoom, which is usually really good about doing the share screen and being able to show you exactly what I'm looking at. So you might even be able to see me, I'm hoping, up in the corner of your screen on your video as we're going through this. So just real briefly, if you didn't know some of the shows that I have been on, a lot of them will probably be recognizable to you, especially if your mom or grandmother watched the stories growing up, and they're down there on the right. So I started on Another World, Sunset Beach, Bold and Beautiful, General Hospital, Days of Our Lives, went on to The Bay, which is an online series, Emmy nominated. Really amazing what they're doing with all new media now. And you'll see me a lot of times popping up on your nighttime shows as well. But I have managed to help my clients get into some major media markets as well. And the best that I have found, the best reaction when people really step out like that, is when they are in their authentic voice, when they are really just following what is in their heart to do, and they have the courage to go out there and be vulnerable and be able to just share their message from the heart. That's really what moves things forward. So if there's something on your heart, I want to make sure that we can help you today in maybe being a little more courageous and stepping into that. So you might have heard the phrase, is one of my favorites: when you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. Now, if you haven't heard it, we're going to explore that a little bit today. But it is one of my favorite things, because that's actually what coaches do. The coaches, mentors, if you have anybody like that in your life, that is what we do. We help you to look at things from a different perspective, to change the way you look at things, because that allows you to see opportunities that chances are you never would have been able to see if it wasn't for somebody else giving you a different perspective. So that said, I'm going to share with you the story of the best life coach that I ever had. So yes, her name was Sparkle. Her bar name, or her nickname, was Sparky. So that's what we called her. This is me with her. And at this point, she's about 28 years old when this photo was taken. She really was such a godsend, but in the beginning, it wasn't all that easy. She had only been mine for a very little time. In fact, at this point, I think I was still leasing her. She was later gifted to me by my trainer, and it was the best stocking stuffer ever. She was my Christmas present. But in the beginning, I was leasing her, and she was at a barn very close to my house, and keeping her in a stall. I don't keep horses in a stall anymore. I didn't know any better then. I know better now. I don't do that. But the story that I'm about to tell you, I want to take you back to that barn and I'm walking down the aisle of the barn. It's in the morning, it's a rainy morning. And the mustiness, that great smell, to me, it's a great smell. That mustiness, that dustiness, that smell of a barn is just even richer because of the wet weather kind of holding it down. And I'm in heaven. I mean, I'm in my 30s and I finally own my first horse. I have been a horse fanatic my whole life. So I finally own my first, well, at least maybe at that point, like I said, leasing, but she was mine. And I knew I was on my way to owning her. I actually wasn't aware she was going to be a gift. I was going to be purchasing her. So I was dedicated to this horse. And I walk into the barn and all of the horses put their heads out of the stall as I'm walking, and I'm petting each one of them and they're nickering and they're greeting me, and I'm just in heaven. I'm so joyful because this is what I wanted my whole life. And Sparky is at the last stall in the barn. And when I walk up, my joy turns to frustration. I look at her and there she is, not greeting me with her nose like all of the other horses. She's greeting me with her rump. Her head is plastered against the back wall, and she has her butt to me, the same as it had been the day before, and the day before that, and the day before that. This was the ritual. I was disappointed every morning. I allowed myself to get to this frustrated state, and I thought, you know what? I'm paying for your food. Remember the being paid in hay thing? And I thought, I waited my whole life to have a horse. Why do I have to have one that's so nasty? Why do I have to have the one that's unfriendly? And I'm going to be honest with you and be a little, very vulnerable by telling you that I had a thought go through, an actual phrase repeatedly go through my head when she did this. And it was, why do I have to get the, and the word was a nasty word and started with a B. That word is very important. I'm not going to say it. I think you know what it is, but it's a very important word and you're going to see why. So that actual horrible phrase went through my head every time that she did this. And I'd be frustrated and disappointed. Right about that time, since it was raining, a lot of the other horse owners there decided they were going to hand walk their horse around the block. I'm the last one to leave the barn. And as we're going up a hill, I've fallen a little bit behind. And I look up and I see all the other owners with their horses. And there's a car that comes up and the driver is a female. And I see her stop at each owner and greet them as they're coming around the corner. And she starts to come down the hill towards me, and I'm new in the neighborhood, so she doesn't know me. But Sparky, she knows, because Sparky's actually been at that barn for a little while. So she pulls up next to me and immediately looks at my horse and says, "Oh, you're walking shy, girl." It still chokes me up to think when she said that, I really got hit, because I thought back to my high school, of all things. I was bullied in high school. I had, like I said, I had started modeling and been in front of the camera when I was 11. So ironically, I was very shy. And I didn't raise my head very much when I was in school because I couldn't see very well. My vision was really bad and I didn't want to wear my glasses. And so I would just put my head down and I would walk from class to class because I didn't want to ignore anybody or have them think I was ignoring them if they said hello to me, because I really couldn't see where it was coming from. The girls that bullied me would shove me and call me that word that began with a B. They would hit me and call me that word. And this went on every day. They would throw things at me and call me stuck up and that word. Now, back to me standing in the rain with the woman in the car, right? I'm thinking of all the judgment that I had just been revealed to me. My judgment of the bullies in high school that I thought were just nasty, horrible, mean people, and the realization that I had just become that. The judgment that my horse was nasty and unfriendly, and I was so frustrated with this when in reality, she was a shy girl. She was just like me. I had become the bully, even though I hadn't hit her, even though I hadn't even verbalized the thought that was going through my head. She felt that because I was frustrated. And we'll get into why horses are so good at helping us regulate our emotions. But this was one incident that kind of kicked everything off. Now, the woman that pulled up that said hello in the car, she wasn't a life coach. That wasn't her job. She just showed up to greet. But she was the one at that point that was able to reframe the situation, to give me a different way of looking at things. And sometimes when you get a different way of looking at things, it's not always an easy shift. Change isn't always easy. Sometimes it's kind of hard. That day was pretty hard. On the other hand, I got a whole new perspective. I instantly looked at this sweet animal with a totally different way. I changed the way I looked at her, and the way she reacted to me changed. Okay, not that very second, but I started to change my attitude. I didn't walk up expecting anger and frustration and disappointment. Instead, I walked up with a gentleness, coercing her with my energy to meet me. And it wasn't long before I was able to walk into the barn, scratch all the other noses that were hanging out, and she would put hers up too. But her reaction wasn't to anything except my energy. So the lesson for me there, and I want to go to the next slide. Hopefully during all this, you can still see me. The lesson for me was immediately how she changed her behavior because of the way I changed mine. Now, horses have been on this earth for 55 million years. Now, don't freak out when you see the slide and think we're going to go into a whole long, historical class. We're not. I'm not going to do that. But it is something to consider. We've been here for 200,000 or so. They have existed for 55 million. They existed because they have a way of reading energy that has kept them alive for all of this time. Because if you are a horse, think about this, you don't have any weapons, you don't have any fangs, you don't have any claws, you have speed, you can run, but you can't hide anywhere. You're a pretty big animal. You are out in the open all the time. That's very vulnerable. So the ability to read energy around you and read whether that lion is going to just lay down and stare at you, or if that lion suddenly decides that it's hungry, that's an energy shift. They have to be able to read that. That's why when we change the way we are around them, it's an immediate mirror back to us. They do something that shows us that we have adjusted our energy. And they'll tell us whether it's adjustment for good or whether it's not sitting well with them. And there's reasons that it wouldn't sit well with them, because what they're going for is simply to be safe. So this is usually, if I'm giving this presentation, I'll ask, who do you think the leader of a wild herd of horses is? And a lot of times people will say the stallion, they'll say the oldest, they'll say the biggest, the strongest. And the reality is, just little, food for thought, it is actually the matriarchal mare. It is a female that is usually the most calm and the most present. In other words, the most aware of what is going on. She will lead them to water, to food, to safety. She is the one that will lead the herd, and they trust her to do that. Now, notice I said calm and aware. When I talk about this being part of my leadership development program, this work with the horses, that's why. Because for us, leadership, that's the best thing that you can be, calm and aware. So when things go crazy, you don't go crazy and freak out. Your emotions don't take over. If you're a really good leader, you can be able to settle in, be calm, be aware of the situation, and get you and your team out of danger as quickly as possible. And that's what we can learn from watching a herd. One of the many things. So moving into what we can learn from them today, something that you can take away. One of the main things I said is that the lead mare is present. This is huge. Present and congruent are the two things that I want to talk to you about today that horses will recognize and react to, and we can see that. You have a 1,200-pound animal, or in the case of this picture, that's our classic German pony. She's not 1,200 pounds. She's a little smaller. But you have a large animal, no matter what, that is reacting to your energy. So it's like a giant billboard that is showing you that you have changed something, and they're reacting in that relationship to you, so that you can be aware of that change and the effect that it has. Here's the funny thing. Human beings react to that energy just the same. We do the exact same thing, but sometimes we don't act on it. In fact, sometimes that's to our detriment, because there are times that we overthink. For instance, most women, in fact, almost 100% of women that are interviewed after they have been attacked in an elevator will tell the police, I felt something, I felt like I shouldn't get in, but I didn't want to hurt the stranger's feelings. And then they went against, they let their brain reason from emotion. I don't want to hurt someone's feelings, even though they didn't know the person. And they put themselves in danger by moving into that situation. So that's what I mean about being present and being able to really read a situation. And a lot of that has to do with intuition. We work on intuition when I work with horses as well. It's one of the very first things that we do, to be able to bring somebody into that present and be able to read that energy as best they can and listen to it. Listening to it is very important. So present and congruent. Now let's talk about present first. Present is what I just said. It's being very in the moment. We are not that. We are not. We are so, at this day and age, we're so blessed with technology and ways to connect that we are rarely present. That it is almost impossible to feel present unless you consciously do that. Here's the thing. Horses haven't changed. That horse that you will meet, that next horse you're going to meet, is going to have that same programming that that horse 500 million years ago did. The thing that kept him alive, that awareness and that ability to run and that vulnerability, that is all ingrained in them. What is the same with us is our need for peace, to be present. We have to have, our brains are designed to have quiet, meditative time. Now, I don't mean meditative as like, if that freaks you out, if that word freaks you out, don't let it freak you out. It just means that we need to have downtime. We need to have time without constant stimulation. Now, there is some stimulation that is better than other stimulation, and that's what I'm going to share with you today that you can take and walk away with. The difference is rhythm versus arrhythmic. Okay, now I'm going to stop for just a second, just fearing that maybe you don't see me. So I just want to go face to face with you real quick. So rhythm versus arrhythmic. Okay, what that means is the natural world has a rhythm to it. So if you think the sun coming up and setting, the moon coming up and setting, the waves coming in and leaving, the high tide coming at a certain time, the birds waking up and going to sleep at a certain time, there is a rhythm to all of that. That is nature. That is true. That is pure. It is unfailing. And when I was growing up, I was drawn to that because my mother fed me a lot of stuff that wasn't true. A lot of lies. And I'm not the only one. I know a lot of people out there have had somebody speak over them words that were not true. And maybe you owned it. Maybe you owned it for a little too long. I know I did. So it's a constant work on ourselves. That's what self-empowerment, self-improvement is all about. We become aware of ourselves. We work from the inside out so that we can change the world around us. And when I talk about that natural world, that is where we can find that rhythm. That is what we are part of. And we forget that so often because we lock ourselves in our air-conditioned homes, and we get into our air-conditioned car and we turn on our podcast or we get on our phone and we go to work and we walk quickly in, usually on our cell phone, until we get to the desk maybe, and then we sit down and we work on the computer, and then we leave and we do the same thing, cell phone to the car, to the podcast, to the home, and then we wake up the next day and do the same thing. And what happens is that sometimes we get to the point of absolute exhaustion. And I was speaking to a group once. It was not my usual group. Usually I speak to entrepreneurs. Just happened that way. I usually speak to entrepreneurs and entrepreneur-minded professionals. This particular time, I was speaking to people that were more government employees. They would probably choose that job for security versus choosing the job for passion. That's just an observation, not a judgment of any kind. But what reinforced that thought for me was when I sat in the back before I spoke, I could hear them over lunch talking. And they were talking about coming into summer, and they were talking about what they wanted to do and vacations. And they were all sharing that on the weekend or over the summer, all they wanted to do was go to the beach, drink beer, and lay in the sand. Go to the beach, drink beer, and lay in the sand. That was it. Now, when I go on vacation, I want to go do a bunch of fun stuff. Like, I don't want to go, I'm not good at laying in the sand. I want to go have experiences. I want to go meet local people. I want to taste the food and just be part of the culture wherever I am. Even if it's 2 hours from my house, I want to see what the locals live like. I want to get involved. I want to have an experience. They didn't. All they wanted to do was just drink beer, lay down in the sand. And at first I thought, oh, that's so sad. Now I know that they were half right. The half being, and you saw the picture that I had up, was the sand. The half being, subconsciously, their body, their soul in some ways, is telling them in order to be healthy that they need to reconnect to nature, literally laying on the sand, laying on the earth, particularly the sand where you have the ocean, that rhythm. Remember I talked about that rhythm? That's what that is. So if you are feeling that way, if you are craving the need to go lay down on the sand, do it. Find a way to get out into nature and just absorb that natural rhythm. It's not hard to do. You can be in the city and you can go out and just listen and watch for a bird call. You can engage in listening to the leaves blow through the trees. There's a rhythm to that. That is what we need in order to keep ourselves healthy. That is rhythm. Arrhythmic is what we're involved in every day. And as I mentioned, we distract ourselves from the natural sounds by being locked up in our little caves and then getting into our moving caves, our cars, and then going into another cave, which is our work. And we don't really come out and celebrate very much, and unless you're a hiker, in which case you're probably listening to this going, yeah, I get that, I know. But if you aren't getting yourself out enough, please do, because the sounds that are arrhythmic will eventually wear on you. And I had a good friend of mine the other day who had just been doing a lot of cognitive stuff. So meaning it was near tax season for her, and she was doing a lot of stuff in the computer, and she had a lot of responsibilities with her kids. And there was just a lot happening that involved a tremendous amount of her attention and focus in the cognitive part of her brain. And she wasn't moving a lot. She was sitting and stressing. So she was headed out somewhere, and she called me and she said how she was just ready to explode because the sound of traffic is driving me crazy. I think I'm going to scream. And I know that. And some of you probably know that. You know that feeling of being so pent up that if you hear one more horn, you think you're just going to flip your lid. That is arrhythmic. The honking, the traffic noise, the sound of all of the chaos in the city. Some people really like that. But to be honest, it's not the way we're programmed. There has to be a balance there. It's not that we have to avoid that, but just know that if you're feeling uptight and you're sitting in traffic, the best thing you can do is to just chill out, tune it out. Maybe even pull over and listen to something really simple. Even, just for the moment, do a breathing exercise. You can do that in the car. Again, rhythm, work that rhythm. One of the gifts that I give away for free is an easy meditation. There's an inspirations guide. I have a lot of free things that if you follow me, you'll have access to. And these are all things that will help you get out of that crazy state that comes from being arrhythmic. So now you have that awareness. Let's go back to the slides. Bear with me for a second. This will take just one moment while I go back to sharing. Okay, let me hit play. Congruent. This was the second word, congruent. Let's talk about what that means. In essence, it means truthful. So you know what this is if somebody isn't congruent. This is the person that you meet that you go, yeah, they seem nice. There's just something. I don't know. You know what I'm talking about? Or a salesperson that seems a little too salesy, like you're just not buying it. And it's because they're probably not believing in what they're selling, but they're working really hard to do it. That's not being congruent. That is our red flag. Horses read this completely. We sometimes use our, big frontal lobe here to talk ourselves around what we are noticing. Horses don't. They don't have that part of the brain. So if you aren't congruent, if you are trying to be something that you are not, they will absolutely ignore you. So the work that we do when I'm doing for instance, my charismatic cowgirl programs, this is when I work with women in what you see as a round pen. So we're in an enclosed area, and it's just the woman and the horse, and they're building a relationship. So in the case of this picture that you're looking at, the truthfulness that came in was she went through an intuition exercise and chose her horse. That's a very important part of the way I work, is you choose who your partner is going to be. And she chose my big male horse. His name is Blue. He's here in this photo. And the reason that she chose him, as it turns out, I didn't know at the time, but as it turns out, she was going through a terrible breakup and had a son that she was trying to connect with. So there was a lot of male energy that she was kind of fearful to engage with, but knew that she had to if she needed to move on. Obviously, she needed to move on from her breakup and the current situation that she was in her life. So she chooses him, and he ignores her initially because she was trying to appear like she knew what she was doing. And a lot of people don't. I mean, she was not a horse girl. I recall she was not a horse girl. So she didn't have any skills of how to move a horse or communicate with a horse. And actually, that's fine. Because when you first meet a human being, you don't know what they're like. You don't know what their love language is. You don't know, where they're from or what programs them or what their trigger is. You don't know any of that stuff. So it's really not that dissimilar to meeting somebody new when you are introduced to a horse. The thing is with the horse, as soon as she shifted, instead of trying to be confident that she knew how to connect this horse and move this horse because, she was determined, she instead went from a very truthful place. She just stood still and thought. Now, keep in mind, she's not even speaking. After all, horses don't speak. They don't know our language. They don't care about our stories. They just want to know how you're being. And her being changed. She stood in the center of the round pen and did nothing on the outside. But what she did was she took some deep breaths and she admitted, I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm not going to hurt you. Please don't hurt me. Let's connect. And invited him just by thinking it and looking at him to come to her. And all we saw from the outside of the round pen watching was this horse who had been engaged in everything except her turn around and do exactly what you see in this picture. He came straight up to her and put his head right at her stomach, right in the very center of her body. So that's what happens when you become truthful and nature accepts you that way. We will do the same thing. So when you're communicating with people, instead of saying, hey, yeah, it's cool, I'm fine. We do that. Let's just be real. We don't have to bleed our heart everywhere, but say, you know what, I'm not fine. This is kind of bugging me a little bit. Can we just chat that out? I'm feeling this way. And that's how you work out conversations. Instead of trying to act like nothing is wrong, have a conversation. And we talk about that. That's part of the coaching, is how do you have a conversation when it's a difficult conversation sometimes, but it's so much better when you come from a truthful place, even when it comes to sales, right? I was saying that if somebody is seeming a little too salesy, you're much better off just doing a sale from the heart. Why are you selling this thing? If it's your product and you're passionate about it, just come from the heart. That is truthful. That is congruent. And if you know that you are doing something great by selling or providing a service to someone, then that's where you should come from. It sounds really easy, and sometimes we're trained out of that, and it's not that easy to get back to it. So these are the things that we talk about when I'm working with someone. Truthful, another quick story here. She also, wonderful girl, very confident, she's a veteran, actually, quite an impressive background, actually, in our armed forces. And she showed up at one of my workshops, and she chose a horse that was a little aloof, who you also see in the picture here. And she was trying to be commanding and, get the horse to do what she wanted it to do. And this horse was a little on the fearful side. She didn't trust very well, and she kept moving away. Same thing here. This woman finally said, okay, all right, I give up. I have no idea what you want. I really don't know what I'm doing here, but it'd be cool if we could hang out. I mean, just like that, in a very fun, playful sort of way. Interestingly enough, I never knew this horse personality to be playful, but she certainly turned around and was trotting after her. And that's why you see her laughing, is that she turned and she just changed instantly and said, okay, I really don't know what I'm doing. We've seen this when people have come in and they say, I am confident, and they're not confident. And the horse will ignore them. And we turn it into saying, I am learning to be confident. And the situation changes and the relationship becomes possible. This is really important if you are a leader and you're leading other people, to be able to come from that place of vulnerability, be present and aware and calm. That's the amazing little trifecta right there. Oh, we skipped past that one. Energy and pressure. That's okay, good. My slide's staying. Energy and pressure is the final thing that I want to leave with you. Energy and pressure is something, that's how horses move each other through the herd. So they will apply pressure, and you see the client here actually putting pressure on the horse in various ways, and she's going through an exercise. But they will actually apply pressure just from their energy. And we can do that. You know what I'm talking about. If somebody walks in with a certain energy, they'll walk past you and you feel it instantly, good or bad. Right? If somebody has a strong energy or strong vibration and they walk into a meeting, it can change the environment of the whole room. this is what they react to in their own way of communicating. We do the same thing. So when you work with the horses, obviously it's going to be like everything, very exaggerated, because you're going to see a result of your energy on a very large animal, and they're going to reflect that back to you. But we have to realize that our energy affects other people all the time, even the way we handshake. If somebody walks up to you and puts their hand forward and says hello and sticks their hand out for you to shake it, that's pressure. You feel the pressure to take your hand and put it in theirs and say hello. Have you ever put your hand out and had somebody refuse it? That's pretty awful, isn't it? So that's when you realize that there is pressure there. Our society has pressure all the time. If you ask your teenage daughter to clean up her room, that's pressure. If she doesn't clean up the room, you increase the pressure, right? With your voice, or you're going to take the phone away, or you can't have the car. I mean, you're going to increase that pressure until you manage to come to some sort of an agreement, hopefully. So to be aware of energy and pressure in our world is extremely important. I'll tell you honestly, it was the work with the horses that showed me. I get very excited about things. I am very high energy. I can be super passionate. And I didn't understand until I did work with horses. And it was a day I was working with ponies, of all things, and 3 or 4 of them. And I was asked to move them. And I didn't realize how intense I could be until I had the facilitator at the time pointed out to me. She's like, you don't have to do that. Try working with as little pressure as possible. I learned so much that day. And I would never approach a person or a horse the way I did that day. But, we're all learning. I'm on a different level of that journey now. Okay, there's some things that I've learned. There's an awful lot that I still have to learn. There's an awful lot that we will constantly be learning. I hope that I keep learning until the day I die. It's an incredible world, and I am extremely curious. I hope you are too. And I want to keep learning and keep doing the things that we're doing. I hope that this was a little enlightening for you, so that whenever you do go to meet somebody or you head out into the world, you know the difference between arrhythmic and rhythmic. If you're feeling stressed, go out into nature. Or if you can't get out of the car, understand that those sounds are arrhythmic, and that is absolutely part of what can make you feel anxious and tight and edgy. So allow some rhythm to come into your world, even if it's just turning everything off in your car and taking that breath, whether it's 4 seconds in, hold it for 4 seconds, release for 4 seconds. Do that 4 times, 5 times, 10 times if you have to. But get a rhythm going around you. If you think about it, when we were first conceived, what was the very first sensation that we had? Probably sound, heartbeat, rhythm, breathing, rhythm. It was our mom's rhythm of her body. We are programmed for that natural rhythm. So allow yourself to have that to de-stress. If you are working on building strong relationships, feeling more confident, the lessons that you can take from the herd today are practice being present, practice being congruent, understand when you're saying something that doesn't feel right. Like if you were to say, hey, my name is, and use your real name, that feels normal. If you say, hey, my name is Patrice, and it's not, it's going to feel weird. So when you're saying something that isn't truthful, when you're saying, sure, I can do that, and you really are just inside going, oh my gosh, how am I going to do what they're asking me to do? Take that check, and you may have to go back and revisit that conversation with the person. Hold that boundary and say, you know what? I just can't. It just doesn't fit in my schedule right now. I'm sorry. So a lot of times when we have to hold up our boundaries, this comes in handy. So that whole congruent conversation. If you are in sales, see if you can come from that point of really knowing what you are delivering to somebody. If you're speaking and you're nervous about that, one way that you can feel more congruent, you're not getting up there and posturing through it. Don't do that. And I can certainly help you with that. I started Charisma on Camera back in 2010. That's one of my things I do. But my advice is, if you're feeling like you're posturing, like it feels horrible to be up there, really connect, get congruent, connect with what you need to share with the people that are in front of you. Why is it that they need to hear what you have to say? And really raise the stakes. What happens if they don't hear what you have to say? What's the worst thing that can happen? What are you saving them from? What are you giving them that is going to make their life better? Whether it's a product or a service or a learning, really come from that sense of giving and serving, and look at it that way. That will help you to feel more congruent. It's going to feel better. It'll be easier. So that is, go ahead, be present, congruent, understand the pressure and the energy that we put on people. And the more that you do this kind of work, and especially if you come and work with the horses or get around horses and are able to do this kind of work with me or with another practitioner, you'll be able to really see how our energy really can be regulated. And we are in control of that. We're in control of so much more of our relationships and our life and our situations than we sometimes think we are. So let's put our best foot forward, take the lessons from the herd, and make it the best day that you can make it. If you have any questions, it's really easy to find me. Just Google Sandra D. Robinson. Go to Sandra, D-E-E, SandraDRobinson.com, and you can go from there. I've got a podcast. I've got YouTube channel. I've got Facebook. I've got a Facebook group called Elevate. You can come and join that. Podcast is called Elevate too, so it's pretty easy. So either way, just Google me. You can find me. I know everybody will do that anyway. Nobody's going to write down a long address. You're just going to Google. That's what we do. Easy to find. And I'm happy to help you in your next steps in your journey. Thanks for watching.